The pediatric and toddler version of the BioNTech COVID vaccine approved for emergency use in the city. A communique issued at the conclusion of a 4-day meeting of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee. And 5 Russians and 3 other people arrested in connection with last Saturday's explosion that damaged the Crimea Bridge. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The government has approved the emergency use of the pediatric and toddler version of the BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine in Hong Kong. The authorities have urged the public to have their children vaccinated as soon as possible, especially if they plan to travel abroad. Meanwhile, the city today reported 4,788 new COVID cases, including 368 imported infections. 5 of the imported cases involved the new XBB Omicron subvariant. Christy Khan has more.
The government said in a press release that Secretary for Health Lo Chongmao has approved the emergency use of the pediatric and toddler version of the BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine in Hong Kong. Authorities said they were negotiating with the vaccine manufacturer about the timeline for its delivery. Meanwhile, a new community vaccination center in Wong Tai Sin Temple Square went into operation today to offer both BioNTech and Sinovac vaccination services to the public. Secretary for the Civil Service Ingrid Yeung, who is in charge of the government's vaccination campaign, inspected the venue this morning. Speaking to reporters, she said the city's vaccination centers are capable of administering around 60,000 COVID jabs every day. However, statistics show that currently fewer than 20,000 people get vaccinated each day. Yuan called on those who plan to spend Christmas overseas to receive at least 1 COVID shot by early next month. If you travel with your children, you have to give them enough protection. It will be troublesome if your children get infected abroad. For example, foreign language communication problems and being unfamiliar with the medical system overseas, she said. She added that more vaccination stations will be set up at convenient locations across the territory, even though some vaccination venues in some sports centers will eventually be closed. Meanwhile, some 20,000 COVID-19 vaccination medical exemption certificates issued by 7 doctors are still deemed valid after a local resident applied for a judicial review. A High Court judge yesterday imposed an interim injunction over the government's plan to invalidate the exemption certificates. The civil service chief today said holders of the certificates in question can still enter regulated premises such as government buildings. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The mainland reported 1,760 COVID cases, with many cities reporting infections involving the Omicron BF7 strain. Some 510 cases were registered in Inner Mongolia. In the virus-hit Hohhot city, 452 districts have been classified as high risk, with residents ordered to stay home. Another 440 cases were logged in Xinjiang, most of them in Urumqi. Meanwhile, the People's Daily published commentary pieces for 3 straight days, stressing the importance of the dynamic zero policy. It said China's vaccination rate is not strong enough to build a shield against severe cases and deaths. The commentary also noted some countries chose to lie flat because they don't have the ability to control the pandemic. The 19th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China concluded its 7th plenary session in Beijing today. A communique was issued afterwards. President Xi Jinping, who is also General Secretary of the party's Central Committee, delivered a speech at the 4-day session. The meeting reviewed the work of the party over the past 5 years. It concluded that the establishment of Xi's core position within the party, as well as the new era with Chinese and socialist characteristics under his leadership, is definitive to the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The Central Committee also hailed the success of implementing patriots ruling Hong Kong, turning the SAR from chaos to prosperity. It also noted the people and their lives have had the greatest protection under Xi's leadership amid the pandemic. The meeting decided that the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China will be convened in Beijing on October 16th. And the documents will be submitted to the National Congress for vetting. Moscow said today it has arrested 5 Russians and 3 citizens of Ukraine and Armenia in connection with Saturday's explosion that damaged the Crimea Bridge. Russia's FSB blames the blast on Ukraine military intelligence, though Kyiv has not claimed responsibility for the attack. The bridge is a symbol of Russia's claim on Crimea, which it annexed in 2014. The attack sparked a massive response by Moscow. Nazvi Karim reports.
The moment a Russian missile smashed into the streets of Dnipro in central Ukraine, one of several major cities targeted by Moscow in its latest revenge attack. As Ukrainians sought protection inside bomb shelters and subways, Kyiv is confident it can neutralize Russia's air power with more Western hardware. Indeed, Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov celebrated HIMARS time on social media, referring to the arrival of 4 of the advanced weapons from the United States. On Tuesday, they received the first of 4 German IRIS-T air defense systems. And the US is also sending NASAM anti-aircraft weapons to combat Russia's aerial attacks. This comes as a US-led coalition of around 50 countries was set to meet on Wednesday in Brussels on NATO's sidelines to discuss further support for Ukraine. On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the leaders of the group of 7 industrial powers, pleading for more help. The group had vowed to back Ukraine for as long as it takes. US President Joe Biden has pledged more support, which Russia said would only serve to extend the conflict. Biden also said he does not think Russian President Vladimir Putin would act on his veiled threat to use tactical nuclear weapons as Moscow suffers defeats on the ground. The US, meanwhile, has dismissed as posturing a remark by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov that Moscow was open to talks with Washington or with Turkey on ways to end the 8-month war.
We see this as posturing. We do not see this as a constructive, legitimate offer to engage in the dialogue and diplomacy that is absolutely necessary to see an end to this brutal war of aggression.
Putin and Turkish leader Tayyip Erdogan are set to meet on Thursday with hints of a Turkish proposal to end the war. But Russia's Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said Moscow has yet to hear of a plan from Turkey or any other country on a potential peace deal. Zelensky has already said he would refuse to meet Putin after Russia recently moved to annex 4 regions in Ukraine. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
U.S. President Joe Biden is re-evaluating America's relationship with Saudi Arabia, his press secretary said. It comes as the Riyadh-led OPEC Plus alliance moves to cut oil production, with Democratic lawmakers calling for a freeze on cooperation with the Saudis. OPEC Plus, which includes Russia, said it would cut production by 2 million barrels a day, propping up prices and allowing Russian President Vladimir Putin to keep paying for the war with Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the Saudis seem to be siding with Moscow in the war.
I have said this last week when OPEC made the decision to align their energy policy with Russia's war aims and against the American people, further underscores that reasoning to realign that relationship, to reevaluate that relationship with Saudi Arabia. Well, we believe by the decision that OPEC Plus made last week, there certainly are aligning themselves with Russia. And right now, this is not a time to be aligning with Russia, especially with this brutal, unprecedented war that they have started in Ukraine. And we have been very clear about that.
A court in military-ruled Myanmar convicted the country's ousted leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, on 2 more corruption charges today. She was handed 2 3-year sentences to be served concurrently, adding to previous jail terms and extending her time behind bars to 26 years. Suu Kyi was accused of receiving $550,000 as a bribe from Mong Wek, a tycoon convicted several years ago of drug trafficking. She denied the allegations. The former leader had already been sentenced to 23 years in prison since being detained in 2021 when the military seized power from her elected government. The military junta convicted her of illegally importing and possessing walkie-talkies, violating COVID restrictions, breaching the country's Official Secrets Act, sedition, election fraud, and 5 other corruption charges. Supporters say all the charges are politically motivated and an attempt to discredit her and legitimize the military rule. That's in addition to preventing her from taking part in the next election that the military has promised to hold in 2023. Still ahead, most construction workers in the city will receive pay hikes of up to 12.5%. In Britain, King Charles will be crowned on May 6th next year. And NASA confirms an asteroid strike results in big nudge. Welcome back to TVB News. Starting next month, most Hong Kong construction workers will receive pay hikes of up to 12.5%. The city's largest construction workers union hopes the pay rise will help attract more young people to the industry. Jackie Lin reports.
After 3 years of pay freezes, most of Hong Kong's construction workers are set to receive a bigger paycheck. The latest minimum pay scale for construction workers was proposed after the Construction Industry Employees General Union consulted its members, business chambers, and various industry stakeholders. The new pay adjustment will kick in on November 1st. Plasterers will receive the largest salary increase with their day rate up from $1,600 to $1,800. That's a rise of 12.5%. That's followed by false ceiling installers, who will get a 12% pay hike. Other workers will receive increases of between $75 and $100 in their day rate. However, concrete, excavation workers, and bar benders will see their pay frozen for another year. The union says the pay increases are relatively modest as they consider the employer's ability to afford the extra costs. This union committee member says they hope the pay hike can attract more young people to join the construction industry and provide the manpower necessary for the city's infrastructure for the next 10 years. The union urges the government to hire local workers instead of importing labor from overseas, citing the city's 10.8% unemployment rate this year, which surged 1.8 percentage points year on year. But that's an idea the Hong Kong Construction Association disagrees with. Lam King Wing, president of the Business Chamber, says the industry now has a shortfall of more than 10,000 workers. According to Lam, last year the sector tried to import around 850 workers, but only 6 applications were approved by the Labor Department. Chinese University business scholar Simon Lee says the government should formulate a sector-by-sector blueprint to resolve Hong Kong's labor issues over the mid to long term. He says if the cost to run a business in Hong Kong gets too high, companies might consider leaving Hong Kong for other regional rivals. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
A spacecraft that plowed into a small, harmless asteroid millions of miles away has succeeded in shifting its orbit. That's according to NASA on Tuesday in announcing the results of its Save the World test. The space agency attempted to test 2 weeks ago to see if in the future a killer rock could be nudged out of Earth's way. This report from NBC News.
From 7 million miles away, photographic proof that NASA's DART mission worked. That exploding cloud of dirt and rock, the moment the refrigerator-sized spacecraft slammed into an asteroid named Dimorphos, orbiting an even bigger asteroid. The impact gave Dimorphos a big shove, dramatically shortening its orbit even more than NASA had hoped.
It was expected to be a huge success if it only slowed the orbit by about 10 minutes. But it actually slowed it by 32 minutes.
Traveling at 14,000 miles per hour, DART's nose camera caught the final seconds before impact. While the asteroid poses no risk to us, NASA is hoping it can one day use the same technique to divert a massive meteor on a collision course with Earth, a so-called planet killer like the one that killed off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago.
Warning time is really key here in order to enable this sort of asteroid deflection to potentially be used in the future.
NASA says it's not tracking any asteroid known to pose an imminent threat to Earth, but there may be others it doesn't see. Ideally, scientists would have decades of warning to use a similar deflection technique and save humanity.
All of us have a responsibility to protect our home planet. After all, it's the only one we have.
Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Back on Earth in the UK, Buckingham Palace has revealed King Charles III will be crowned at Westminster Abbey on May 6, 2023. The palace said the coronation ceremony will be conducted by Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Camilla, the Queen Consort, will be crowned alongside her husband. British media reported that the guest list would be reduced to 2,000 from an initially planned 8,000. The news emerged as Charles and Camilla visited a village in Aberdeenshire in Scotland to thank the public for their support following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Have a good evening.